A Monday morning in the federal courthouse of Manhattan, the courtroom erupted when billionaire Ariana Lockhart stood alone. Her entire legal team had vanished minutes before trial. Ariana trembled before dozens of cameras. The judge raised his gavel. Then a voice cut through the silence. The man holding a mop in the corner stepped forward and said, "I will defend her." No one knew this janitor was once a legal genius buried for 15 years. But what made him step into the light at that exact moment? The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. Every eye locked on the man in the blue janitor uniform standing near the back wall. He still held the mop handle in one hand. Judge Harold Brennan leaned forward over the bench, his glasses sliding down his nose. "Excuse me?" Elliot Warren stepped away from his cleaning cart. His work boots squeaked against the polished marble floor. He walked toward the defense table where Ariana Lockhart stood frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the wooden surface. "I said I will defend her," Elliot repeated. His voice was steady now, louder. "I'm a licensed attorney in the state of New York." The prosecutor, Marcus Holt, shot to his feet. He was a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Elliot made in 3 months. "Your Honor, this is absurd. This man is a janitor." He just interrupted a federal proceeding. Judge Brennan raised a hand. "Mr. Warren, is that your name?" "Yes, Your Honor. Do you have proof of your license?" Elliot reached into the chest pocket of his uniform and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open and produced a laminated card. He walked forward and handed it to the bailiff, who carried it up to the judge. Judge Brennan studied it for a long moment. His eyebrows lifted. "This shows you were admitted to the New York bar 23 years ago. It's still active, though it notes you haven't practiced in 15 years. He looked up. "Why is that?" Elliot met his gaze. "Personal reasons, Your Honor." Marcus Holt stepped forward. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Miss Lockhart had a legal team of 6 attorneys from one of the top firms in the city. They withdrew this morning. Now a courthouse custodian wants to represent her in a federal theft case? This is a mockery of the judicial system." Judge Brennan set the card down. He looked at Ariana. "Miss Lockhart, do you consent to this representation?" Ariana turned her head slowly. She looked at Elliot for the first time. Her eyes were red, her mascara smudged. She had been crying. She studied his face, searching for something. Then she nodded. "Yes, I do." The judge exhaled. "Very well. Mr. Warren, you have 72 hours to prepare. We reconvene Thursday morning at 9. Court is adjourned." He struck the gavel once. The room exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes lit up the space like fireworks. Ariana grabbed her purse and turned toward the side exit. Elliot followed her. 2 security guards flanked them as they pushed through the crowd and into a narrow hallway. They didn't speak until they were outside. The cold November air hit them like a slap. Ariana pulled her coat tighter and walked toward a black car waiting at the curb. Elliot stayed a few steps behind. She stopped and turned. "Get in," Elliot hesitated. "I need to clock out first." "No, get in now." He climbed into the back seat. The driver pulled away from the courthouse. Ariana sat on the opposite side, staring out the window. For 5 minutes, neither of them said a word. The car wound through Manhattan traffic, heading uptown. Finally, she spoke. "Why did you do that?" Elliot looked at his hands. They were rough, scarred from years of manual labor. "I don't know. That's not an answer." He looked up. "I've been cleaning that courtroom for 3 years. I've watched you sit through every hearing. I've seen your lawyers argue motions, file briefs, cross-examine witnesses, and I've seen them lose. Badly." Ariana's jaw tightened. "They didn't lose. They quit. Same result." She turned to face him fully. "Do you know who I am?" "Ariana Lockhart. You run Lockhart Quantum Technologies. You developed some kind of energy breakthrough that threatens the oil and gas industry. And now someone's trying to bury you with a bogus theft charge." Her eyes narrowed. "How do you know it's bogus?" "Because I read the case files." How? I clean the courthouse at night. Judges leave documents on their desks. I have access. He shrugged. And I have insomnia. The car pulled up to a sleek glass tower on the Upper East Side. The driver opened the door. Ariana stepped out and looked back at Elliot. Come on, we have work to do. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park. The furniture was modern, minimal. Everything was white or gray or steel. Ariana walked to a large dining table covered with cardboard boxes. She gestured to them. That's everything. Contracts, emails, financial records, lab reports. My old legal team went through it all and told me we had no case. She crossed her arms. You have 72 hours to find something they missed. Elliot set down his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. I'll need coffee. Kitchen's that way. He started with the emails. There were thousands of them, printed and organized in binders. He scanned each one, looking for inconsistencies, gaps, anything that felt wrong. At first, nothing stood out. The language was technical, dense, references to quantum entanglement, photon efficiency, energy conversion rates. He barely understood half of it. But then he noticed something. A thread between Ariana and her former assistant, Julia Marsh. The tone shifted halfway through. In the earlier messages, Julia was warm, supportive. She called Ariana brilliant and unstoppable. But in the later emails, her language became colder, more formal. And then the messages stopped entirely. Elliot flipped to the contract files. He found Julia's employment agreement. It was standard except for one clause buried near the end, a non-compete provision that seemed oddly broad. It prohibited her from working in any capacity related to quantum energy research for 5 years after leaving the company. That was unusual. Most non-competes were limited to direct competitors. He opened his laptop and searched for Julia's name. She had a LinkedIn profile. According to it, she left Lockhart Quantum in March of the previous year. 2 months later, she joined Nexus Corp as a technology consultant. Nexus Corp. The company suing Ariana for theft. Elliot leaned back in his chair. It was past midnight now. Ariana sat across from him, reviewing documents with sharp focus. He watched her work for a moment. She hadn't given up. Even after her lawyers abandoned her, even facing public humiliation, she kept fighting. He stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, a grid of lights and shadows. He thought about the last time he had stood in a courtroom as a lawyer. 15 years ago, he had been 30 years old, confident, hungry. He had taken on a case defending a journalist named Robert Hayes. Hayes had published an expose on government corruption, naming senators, lobbyists, shell companies funneling illegal campaign funds. Powerful people wanted him silenced. The trial had started well. Elliot had witnesses, documents, recordings. Then the witnesses disappeared. One died in a car accident. Another recanted his testimony. The documents vanished from the evidence locker, and Elliot found himself accused of fabricating evidence. He was cleared eventually, but the damage was done. His reputation was destroyed. No firm would hire him. Clients avoided him. And then his wife, Claire, died. A hit-and-run driver on a rainy night. The police never found who did it, but Elliot knew. He had no proof, but he knew. She had been a warning, a message to stop digging, so he stopped. He quit the law. For 12 years, he worked odd jobs, moved from city to city, trying to outrun the past. Then he settled in New York and took a job as a janitor at the courthouse 3 years ago. He raised his daughter, Mia, alone. He told himself it was safer this way, quieter. No one would come after a man who pushed a mop for a living. But watching Ariana stand alone in that courtroom had cracked something open inside him. He saw himself 15 years ago. He saw Claire. He saw every person who had been crushed by people with money and power and no conscience. He walked back to the table and kept reading. By 3 a.m, he had found it. A series of internal emails from Nexus Corp that Ariana's legal team had somehow overlooked. They were part of a discovery dump, buried in a folder labeled miscellaneous correspondence. The emails were between David Corbin, the CEO of Nexus, and a man named Leonard Price, who appeared to be a consultant. The subject line of the first email read, "Lockhart situation next steps." Elliot clicked it open. David Corbin had written, "We need to move faster. Her technology could cut energy costs by 80% within 5 years. If that goes mainstream, we're dead. How do we stop it?" Leonard Price had replied, "Legal route is cleanest. We have Julia on payroll. She can copy the research data and we'll claim Lockhart stole it from us. Frame it as corporate espionage. Media will eat it up." Elliot's hands shook as he scrolled through the rest of the thread. There were more emails. Plans to bribe witnesses, discussions about paying off Ariana's lawyers to sabotage her defense, references to contingency measures if the lawsuit didn't work. He printed everything. Then he called to Ariana. She looked up from her work. "What time is it?" "Late. You need to see this." He spread the emails across the table. She read them slowly, her face going pale. When she finished, she looked up at him. "They planned this from the beginning." "Yes. My lawyers knew. That's why they left, probably." She stood and walked to the window. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark glass. "My technology works. It's real. I've spent 10 years developing it. Do you know what it could do? It could provide clean energy to 1 billion people. It could end dependence on fossil fuels. It could change everything." Her voice cracked. "And they want to kill it because it threatens their profit margins." Elliot joined her at the window. "That's how the world works. Then the world is broken." "Yes, it is." She turned to him. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. You have nothing to gain from this. If anything, you're putting yourself in danger." Elliot thought about Mia. She was 13 now, smart, curious, stubborn like her mother. He worked 2 jobs to keep her in a decent school, to make sure she had a chance at a better life. Every night, when he came home at 4 in the morning, exhausted and smelling of cleaning chemicals, he wondered if she would grow up thinking her father was a quitter, a man who gave up. He looked at Ariana. "Because someone has to." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, what do we do next?" "We take this to court. We expose them, and we make sure they can't hide." They worked through the rest of the night. Elliot drafted motions, organized evidence, prepared arguments. Ariana answered his questions about the technology, explained the science in terms he could understand. By the time the sun came up, they had a strategy. As Elliot gathered his papers to leave, his phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. He opened it. There were no words, just a photo. It showed Mia walking into her school, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Below the photo, a second message appeared. "If he continues, she won't have a father anymore." Elliot stared at the screen. His chest tightened. He felt the air leave his lungs. Ariana noticed. "What is it?" He showed her the phone. She read the message and her face went white. "You should walk away, right now. I'll find someone else." Elliot locked the phone and slipped it into his pocket. He picked up his briefcase. "No, they're threatening your daughter." "I know. Then why?" "Because if I walk away now, I'm teaching her that the right thing to do is run when things get hard. I'm teaching her that people with power always win. I'm teaching her that justice doesn't matter." He looked at Ariana. "I won't do that." She stared at him, her eyes wet. "You could lose everything. I already did, 15 years ago." He moved toward the door. "This time, I'm not running." Elliot went home that morning but didn't sleep. He sat at the small kitchen table in his Queens apartment and drank coffee until his hands shook. The threat replayed in his mind. The photo of Mia, the message. He thought about calling the police, but what would he say? Someone sent him a picture? That wasn't a crime. Not yet. At 7:30, he called Mia's school and asked them to keep her inside during recess. He told them there had been a security concern. The principal asked questions. Elliot gave vague answers and hung up. Then he called his neighbor, Mrs. Chen. an elderly woman who had helped him with Mia over the years. He asked if Mia could stay with her for the rest of the week. Mrs. Chen agreed without asking why. Elliot showered, changed into his janitor uniform, and went to work. The courthouse staff stared at him differently now. Word had spread. The janitor was representing a billionaire. Some laughed. Others whispered. When Elliot pushed his cart down the third-floor hallway, 2 paralegals stopped talking and watched him pass. One of them smirked. "Good luck with that case, counselor," the man said. His colleague laughed. Elliot kept walking. He had 72 hours to prepare for trial. He couldn't afford to waste energy on humiliation. That night, he clocked out at 11 and returned to Ariana's penthouse. She was waiting with more files. They worked until 4 in the morning. Then Elliot went home, slept for 2 hours, and returned to the courthouse to mop floors. By Wednesday night, he was running on fumes. His body ached, his eyes burned, but the case was ready. Thursday morning arrived. Elliot put on the only suit he owned. It was 15 years old, slightly too tight around the shoulders, but it was clean. He met Ariana outside the courthouse at 8:30. She wore a charcoal gray suit and no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back. She looked calm, but Elliot saw the tension in her jaw. "Ready?" she asked. "No," Elliot said. "But we're going anyway." The courtroom was packed, every seat filled. Reporters lined the back wall. Camera crews waited outside. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a spectacle. Judge Brennan entered, and everyone stood. He took his seat and looked at Elliot. "Mr. Warren, are you prepared to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Then let's begin. Mr. Holt, call your first witness." Marcus Holt stood. He was polished, confident, playing to the jury like an actor on stage. The prosecution calls Dr. Raymond Bryce. A man in his 60s walked to the witness stand. He wore a gray suit and wire-rimmed glasses. He had the presence of someone used to being the smartest person in the room. He was sworn in and sat down. Marcus Holt smiled. "Dr. Bryce, can you tell the court about your background?" Bryce nodded. "I have a doctorate in electrical engineering from MIT. I've spent 30 years working in advanced energy systems. I've consulted for the Department of Energy, NASA, and several private corporations. And are you familiar with the technology at the center of this case?" "I am. I reviewed the quantum energy system developed by Miss Lockhart's company. I also reviewed similar research conducted by Nexus Corp." "And what did you conclude?" Bryce adjusted his glasses. "Miss Lockhart's system is nearly identical to proprietary research conducted by Nexus 3 years ago. The architecture, the photon modulation technique, even the software algorithms they match. It's not a coincidence. It's theft," the courtroom murmured. Ariana's face remained blank, but Elliot saw her hands tighten into fists under the table. Marcus Holt walked back to his seat. "No further questions." Judge Brennan looked at Elliot. "Mr. Warren, your witness." Elliot stood. He had not cross-examined anyone in 15 years. His heart pounded. He picked up a folder and approached the witness stand. "Dr. Bryce, you said you have a doctorate in electrical engineering from MIT. Is that correct?" "Yes. And you've worked in energy systems for 30 years. "That's right." Elliot opened the folder. "Can you tell the court how many peer-reviewed papers you've published on quantum physics?" Bryce blinked. "I'm not a quantum physicist. I'm an electrical engineer." "Right. So the answer is 0. Quantum energy systems involve electrical engineering principles." "How many papers, Dr. Bryce?" "None." Elliot pulled out a document. "This is your resume, provided to the court in discovery. It lists 43 publications. Not one of them mentions quantum mechanics, quantum entanglement, or photon behavior." He looked up. "Yet you're presenting yourself as an expert on quantum energy technology. Why is that?" Marcus Holt stood. "Objection, relevance." Judge Brennan waved him down. "Overruled. Answer the question, Dr. Bryce." Bryce shifted in his seat. "I consulted with actual quantum physicists. I reviewed their findings." "Consulted with whom?" Colleagues at Nexus. So you didn't conduct an independent analysis. You relied on information provided by the company suing Miss Lockhart. That's standard practice in consulting. Dr. Bryce, did Nexus Corp pay you for your testimony? The room went silent. Bryce's face flushed. I was compensated for my time. How much? That's confidential. Elliot pulled out another document. This is a bank statement obtained through discovery. On March 15th of last year, you received a wire transfer of $300,000 from a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. He handed the document to the judge. That shell company is owned by Nexus Corp. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled notes. The jury leaned forward. Marcus Holt shot to his feet, but Judge Brennan silenced him with a look. Elliot turned back to Bryce. $300,000. That's a lot of money for a consultation, isn't it? Bryce didn't answer. Let me ask you something else. You testified that Miss Lockhart's technology matches Nexus's research. Did you actually see Nexus's research? I was briefed on it. Did you see the lab reports? The test results? The raw data? No. That's proprietary. So you testified under oath that two technologies are identical, but you've never actually examined one of them. Bryce opened his mouth, then closed it. Elliot stepped closer. You're not an expert, Dr. Bryce. You're a hired gun. Nexus paid you to come here and lie. Marcus Holt slammed his hand on the table. Objection. Counsel is attacking the witness. Judge Brennan raised his hand. Sustained. Mr. Warren, rephrase. Elliot didn't take his eyes off Bryce. Dr. Bryce, have you ever met Miss Lockhart before today? No. Have you ever visited her lab? No. Have you ever reviewed her actual research notes? No. Then how can you testify that she stole anything? Bryce said nothing. Elliot turned to the judge. No further questions. Judge Brennan looked at Bryce. Dr. Bryce, I'm ordering a full investigation into your financial relationship with Nexus Corp. You're dismissed. Bryce left the stand quickly, his face red. Marcus Holt stared at Elliot with open hostility. The jury watched Elliot return to his seat. For the first time in 15 years, he felt the old rhythm come back. The clarity. The control. Ariana leaned close and whispered, That was incredible. Elliot didn't respond. He was already thinking about the next witness. The trial recessed for lunch. Elliot and Ariana walked to a small deli 2 blocks away. They didn't talk much. Elliot ordered a sandwich he didn't eat. His mind was running through every possible move Marcus Holt might make next. When they returned to the courthouse, a man in a dark suit was waiting outside the courtroom. He stepped in front of Elliot. Mr. Warren. A word. Elliot stopped. Who are you? My name is Leonard Price. I work for Nexus Corp. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You did well in there this morning. Very impressive. But you should know that this case is bigger than you understand. There are powerful people involved. People who don't lose. Ariana stepped forward. Is that a threat? Leonard ignored her. He kept his eyes on Elliot. I'm offering you a way out. Walk away from this case. We'll make sure you're compensated. Generously. Enough to take care of your daughter for a long time. Elliot's blood went cold. You stay away from her. Leonard smiled again. I'm just saying accidents happen, especially to people who don't know when to quit. He turned and walked away. Ariana grabbed Elliot's arm. We need to call the police. And tell them what? He didn't threaten us. Not explicitly. Elliot, we keep going. That's the only way this ends. That night, Elliot returned to his apartment and found the door ajar. His stomach dropped. He pushed it open slowly. The living room had been torn apart, furniture overturned, cushions slashed, papers scattered everywhere. His laptop was gone. So were Mia's school photos. He called the police. They came, took a report, and told him it was probably a burglary. They didn't seem interested in pursuing it. After they left, Elliot sat on the floor and tried to steady his breathing. His phone rang. It was Mrs. Chen. Elliot, Mia is safe with me. Don't worry. Thank you, Elliot said. His voice cracked. You're doing something important, aren't you? I'm trying. Then keep going. We'll be fine here. He hung up and sat in the ruined apartment for a long time. Then he called Ariana. We can't stay in our homes anymore, he said. It's not safe. Come here. You can stay in the guest room. I have security, cameras, a panic room if we need it. Elliot wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He packed a bag and drove to the Upper East Side. When he arrived at the penthouse, Ariana greeted him at the door. You'll be safe here, I promise. That night, Elliot worked in the dining room while Ariana reviewed financial statements at the other end of the table. They didn't talk about the break-in or the threats. They just worked. Around midnight, Ariana stood and walked to the kitchen. She poured 2 glasses of water and brought one back to Elliot. He took it and drank half in one go. Ariana sat down across from him. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really stop practicing law? Elliot set the glass down. He had been waiting for this question. I told you. Personal reasons. That's not an answer. He looked at her. She wasn't going to let it go. So he told her. About Robert Hayes, the journalist. About the trial that fell apart. About the accusations, the destroyed reputation, the wife who died in a hit-and-run that was never solved. He told her everything. When he finished, Ariana was quiet for a long time. Then she said, You think they killed her? I know they did. But you can't prove it. No. So you gave up. Elliot flinched. I had a daughter to protect, and now you're risking her anyway. He looked at her sharply. What are you saying? Ariana leaned forward. I'm saying you didn't step into that courtroom for me. You did it for yourself. Because you've been running for 15 years, and you're tired of it. Elliot wanted to argue, but he couldn't. She was right. He had been running, and he was tired. Maybe, he said finally. But I'm not running anymore. Ariana nodded. Good, because neither am I. The next morning, Elliot woke to the sound of breaking glass. He bolted upright. It was still dark outside. He heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Fast. He ran to the living room. Ariana was already there, phone in hand. I called 911. They're coming. 3 men in black masks entered the room. They carried guns. One of them pointed at Ariana. Where's the phone? Elliot stepped in front of her. What phone? The one Julia gave you. Hand it over. Elliot's mind raced. Julia. Ariana's former assistant. She must have left evidence behind. Evidence they needed to destroy. I don't know what you're talking about, Elliot said. The man raised his gun. Last chance. Ariana grabbed Elliot's arm. It's in the safe. I'll get it. No, Elliot said. Don't. But Ariana was already moving. She walked to a painting on the wall, removed it, and opened a small safe. She pulled out a phone and held it up. Here. The man stepped forward to take it. But before he could, the sound of sirens filled the air. The men looked at each other. One of them cursed. They turned and ran. Elliot exhaled. Ariana stood frozen, still holding the phone. The police arrived 3 minutes later. They searched the building, but the men were gone. An officer took their statements. He said they'd increase patrols in the area. He said they were lucky. After the police left, Elliot sat down on the couch. His hands were shaking. Ariana sat next to him. We need to end this, she said. Before someone gets killed. Elliot nodded. We will. Tomorrow. In court. But neither of them believed it would be that simple. At 2 a.m, the doorbell rang. Ariana looked at Elliot. He stood and walked to the door, checking the security camera first. A woman stood outside. She was crying. Elliot recognized her. Julia Marsh. He opened the door. Julia stumbled inside, her face bruised, her clothes torn. She looked at Ariana. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ariana stared at her. What are you doing here? Julia pulled a phone from her pocket. This is everything. Every call, every email, every payment. David Corbin, the CEO of Nexus, he forced me to steal your research. He threatened my family, but I recorded everything. I have proof. Elliot took the phone. Why now? Because they tried to kill me tonight. They think I know too much. So I ran. She looked at Ariana. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted this." Ariana said nothing. Elliot opened the phone and scrolled through the files. It was all there. Recorded calls, wire transfers, orders to sabotage Ariana's legal team, plans to eliminate witnesses. Everything. He looked up at Julia. "This changes everything. We can—" The window exploded. Glass showered the room. Elliot hit the ground. Ariana screamed. 3 men in tactical gear stormed through the broken window, rifles raised. One of them fired. Julia cried out and fell, clutching her shoulder. Blood spread across her shirt. Elliot grabbed Julia and pulled her toward the hallway. Ariana followed. They ran to the panic room at the end of the hall. Elliot shoved everyone inside and slammed the steel door shut. He locked it. Julia was bleeding badly. Elliot pressed his hand against her wound. "Stay with me. You're going to be okay." Outside, footsteps, voices, then the sound of drilling. Ariana backed against the wall. "They're going to blow the door." Elliot pulled out his phone. He opened Julia's phone and began uploading every file to the cloud, to his email, to every contact he had. He sent it to the FBI, the district attorney, the press. He sent it everywhere. The drilling stopped. Then a voice from outside. "You have 30 seconds to open the door." Elliot looked at Ariana. At Julia, who was barely conscious. "We're not opening it." "Then you're all dead." Elliot heard the beeping. A timer, counting down. Julia's eyes fluttered. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's okay," Elliot said. "You did the right thing." The beeping grew faster. 20 seconds. 15. Elliot pulled Julia closer. Ariana closed her eyes. 10 seconds. Elliot thought about Claire. About the cases he had won. About the ones he had lost. About everything he had given up and everything he had fought for. 5 seconds. He thought about Mia growing up without him. 3 seconds. He heard something. Rotors. A helicopter. 2 seconds. Then shouting. Gunfire. Chaos. 1 second. The beeping stopped. The panic room door stayed locked. Elliot kept pressure on Julia's wound, listening to the chaos outside. Gunfire. Shouting. Heavy boots on marble floors. Then silence. A voice called through the steel. "Mr. Warren, this is Agent Sarah Tran, FBI. You can open the door. The threat is neutralized." Elliot recognized the name. Sarah Tran. He had worked with her 20 years ago on a fraud case. She had been a junior agent then, sharp and relentless. He hadn't spoken to her since he left the law. He unlocked the door and pushed it open slowly. Sarah stood in the hallway, wearing tactical gear and holding a rifle. Behind her, 6 agents in black uniforms secured the penthouse. 3 men lay handcuffed on the floor, their faces pressed against the marble. Sarah looked at Elliot. She was older now, gray streaks in her dark hair, but her eyes were the same, hard and focused. "You look terrible." Elliot managed a weak smile. "It's been a long week." Sarah glanced at Julia, who was pale and barely conscious. "We need a medic here," she shouted. An agent rushed forward with a medical kit. Sarah looked back at Elliot. "We got your email 17 minutes ago. Everything you sent, the recordings, the financial records, the communications. It's enough to bring down half the energy sector." She looked at Ariana, then back at Elliot. "We mobilized immediately." "If we'd been 5 minutes later." "We know," Elliot said. Sarah nodded. "We need statements from all of you. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. This building is compromised." They were taken to a federal safe house in Brooklyn. It was a nondescript brownstone with reinforced doors and blacked-out windows. Agents stood guard outside. Elliot, Ariana, and Julia, who was stabilized by paramedics, sat in a conference room and gave their statements. It took hours. Sarah recorded everything. When they finished, she leaned back in her chair. David Corbin was arrested 30 minutes ago. He was trying to board a private jet to Switzerland. Leonard Price was picked up at his home. We also have warrants out for 11 executives at Nexus and 4 board members at major energy corporations. Marcus Holt is in custody as well. This is the biggest corporate conspiracy case we've seen in a decade. Ariana stared at the table. She looked exhausted. What about the trial? It's over, Sarah said. The charges against you are being dismissed. The evidence we have makes it clear you were framed. Ariana didn't react. Elliot thought she might cry, but she didn't. She just sat there, numb. Sarah looked at Elliot. We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. Corbin's lawyers will fight hard. They'll try to discredit everything. But with your testimony and Julia's recordings, we have a solid case. I'll testify, Elliot said. Sarah stood. Get some rest, all of you. You're safe here. They stayed in the safe house for 3 days. Julia recovered slowly. She spent most of the time staring out the window, lost in her own guilt. Ariana worked on her laptop, coordinating with her company, answering emails from investors who wanted to know if she was still alive. Elliot watched them both and felt the weight of the past week settle on his shoulders. He had stepped into that courtroom thinking he could help one person. He hadn't realized he was stepping into a war. On the 4th day, Sarah told them they could go home. Security details would be assigned to each of them. Corbin and Price were in custody. Their associates were either arrested or in hiding. The immediate threat was over. Elliot went to Mrs. Chen's apartment and picked up Mia. She hugged him tightly. I was worried about you, Dad. I'm okay now, he said. Everything's okay. They returned to their apartment in Queens. It had been cleaned and repaired while they were gone. New locks on the doors, new windows. It felt different now. Safer, maybe. Or just emptier. Mia went to her room and closed the door. Elliot sat on the couch and stared at the wall. His phone buzzed. A message from Ariana. Thank you. For everything. He typed back. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You saved my life. More than once. Elliot didn't know what to say to that. So he just wrote, get some rest. 2 weeks later, the case against David Corbin went public. The media exploded. Front-page stories in every major newspaper. Cable news ran segments around the clock. Nexus Corp's stock plummeted. 3 energy companies filed for bankruptcy. Senators called for investigations. The Department of Justice announced a task force. Elliot watched it all from his apartment. He didn't give interviews. He didn't appear on television. He just went back to work. Back to mopping floors and emptying trash cans. His co-workers didn't mock him anymore. Some of them looked at him with something like respect. Others avoided him entirely. 3 months later, the trial began. Elliot testified for 2 days. He walked the jury through the evidence, explained how he had uncovered the conspiracy, described the threats and the violence. Marcus Holt sat at the defense table with his own lawyer, claiming he had been coerced into accepting bribes from Nexus. The jury didn't believe it. After 6 weeks of testimony, they convicted David Corbin on 14 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Marcus Holt was convicted on 8 counts. Leonard Price was convicted on 12. Corbin was sentenced to 30 years. Holt got 15. Price got 20. When the verdicts were read, Elliot sat in the gallery and felt nothing. No relief. No satisfaction. Just a quiet exhaustion. After the trial, Ariana called him. I want to do something. For you. And for people like you. What do you mean? I'm starting a foundation. Legal aid for people who can't afford representation. People who get crushed by corporations or the government because they don't have the money to fight back. She spoke quickly, excited. I want to call it the Lockhart Legal Justice Fund. And I want you to run it. Elliot didn't answer right away. He thought about the janitor uniform hanging in his closet, the mop and bucket in the courthouse supply room, the years he had spent invisible, scrubbing floors while lawyers argued cases he used to argue himself. I'm not a lawyer anymore, he said finally. Yes, you are. You just forgot for a while. He smiled for the first time in weeks. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. I'm not patient. A week later, Elliot met with Ariana at her office. She had drawn up plans for the foundation. A board of directors, a budget, office space in downtown Manhattan. She wanted to fund 50 cases in the first year. 100 in the second. "I want you to pick the cases," she said. "People who deserve justice but can't get it because the system is rigged against them." Elliot looked at the plans. "This is going to cost millions." "I have millions. And after what happened, my technology is more valuable than ever. I'm licensing it to 3 countries. The revenue will be enough to fund this for decades." He looked at her. "Why are you doing this?" Ariana met his eyes. "Because a janitor saved my life. And if he hadn't, the world would have lost something important. Not just my technology, but the idea that one person, standing in the right place at the right time, can change everything." She leaned forward. "I want to make sure other people get that chance." Elliot thought about Robert Hayes, the journalist who had been destroyed 15 years ago. He thought about Claire, who had died because he had tried to do the right thing. He thought about all the people who had been crushed by power and money and indifference. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." Ariana smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen from her since the trial began. "Good, because I already rented the office space." 6 months later, Elliot stood in front of a small building on Center Street. The sign above the door read, "Warren and Associates." Below it, in smaller letters, "Funded by the Lockhart Legal Justice Fund." Mia stood next to him, carrying a box of files. She looked up at the sign. "Warren and Associates. Does that mean I'm an associate?" Elliot laughed. "You're 13. You're not even in high school yet. I can still help. I'm good at organizing files." "Fine. You're an associate. Unpaid." She grinned. "I'll take it." They went inside. The office was small but clean. 3 desks, a conference room. Shelves lined with law books Elliot hadn't opened in 15 years. Ariana had insisted on buying them. She said every law office needed a library, even if everything was online now. Elliot set down his box and looked around. It didn't feel real yet. For so long, he had been invisible. A man who pushed a mop and kept his head down. Now he was standing in his own office, with his own practice, with the resources to take on cases no one else would touch. His phone buzzed. A message from Sarah Tran. "Heard about the new office. Congratulations. If you ever need help with a case, call me. We owe you." Elliot smiled and pocketed the phone. That first week, 47 people called asking for help. Elliot couldn't take all of them, but he took 12. A single mother fighting an unlawful eviction. A factory worker injured on the job whose employer refused to pay medical bills. A veteran denied benefits by the VA. People the system had failed. Elliot worked 16-hour days. Ariana stopped by the office twice a week, sometimes to discuss cases, sometimes just to check in. They never talked about what had happened in the penthouse. They didn't need to. It was always there, unspoken, a shared understanding of what they had survived. One evening, after everyone else had gone home, Ariana sat across from Elliot in the conference room. He was reviewing a brief, making notes in the margins. She watched him for a moment, then spoke. "Do you regret it?" "Stepping into that courtroom?" Elliot set down his pen. "No. Even after everything that happened? The threats? The violence?" He thought about it. "I regret that people got hurt. I regret that Julia carries that guilt. But stepping forward? No, I don't regret that." Ariana nodded. "Good. Because I don't either." They sat in silence for a while. Then Ariana stood. "I should go. I have a board meeting in the morning." Elliot walked her to the door. She turned back before leaving. "Thank you, Elliot, for believing in this. For believing in me. I should be thanking you. Maybe we're even." She left. Elliot stood in the doorway and watched her walk down the street until she disappeared around the corner. Then he went back inside and returned to his work. A year later, Warren and Associates had taken on 93 cases. They had won 62 of them. The rest were still in progress. Elliot hired 2 more lawyers and a paralegal. The office expanded into the space next door. The Lockhart Legal Justice Fund became one of the most well-known legal aid organizations in the country. Elliot was invited to speak at law schools. He declined. He was invited to write a book about the case. He declined. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to work. One afternoon, he stood in the federal courthouse of Manhattan. He was there for a hearing on a civil rights case. He walked through the main hall, passing the courtroom where it had all started. He stopped and looked inside. The room was empty, the benches polished, the judge's chair vacant. He thought about the man he had been a year ago, the janitor who kept his head down and didn't ask questions, the man who had convinced himself that staying invisible was the same as staying safe. That man was gone now. Or maybe he had never really existed. Maybe he had just been waiting. Elliot turned and walked toward the courtroom where his hearing was scheduled. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor. He wore a suit now. He carried a briefcase. But he still remembered what it felt like to push a mop through these halls. Invisible and forgotten. He would never forget. Because the moment you forget where you came from, you lose sight of why you started. Elliot Warren had started because someone needed help and no one else was willing to give it. He would keep going for the same reason. One case at a time. One person at a time. That was enough. That was everything.